And we're live. We're going to get started a little bit early so that I can, I don't have to go over too much. Hopefully, some of you guys were watching last night. We did like a 5-hour deal with Matt from Sloppy on his Sloppy radio show. So that's also going to be available as a podcast, so you guys can listen to that while you're driving. So if you got any really, really long trips like I do down to West Tech, you have something to listen to basically the whole time, because it's really, really long. But we covered a lot of good stuff. We went over some, funny questions, and then some serious stuff, and we were talking about tuning and turbo stuff, and all sorts of good stuff. Because Matt's cool. He does obviously different things that I do, and he's a different guy, and so we got to talk about lots of cool stuff. So it was good, and I want to thank Matt for letting me come on the show. That was cool, and I liked it. I'm also getting ready to head back and visit my good buddy Brian Tooley and see all the guys back there at Brian Tooley Racing. Lots of awesome guys. Got some cool stuff going to do on the dyno back there. Yes, we're going to do some Gen 5 stuff. And I just sent Brian a message and said, hey, what we need to look at is one of those 6.6 liter, the 68T or Ls or whatever, the truck motors, the LT5 or LT1 based truck motor. So that would be cool. The L8T, I think, is what it's called. So I'm sure somebody will chime in and let me know exactly what the designation is. I looked it up. Let's see. It was, and let's see here. Yeah, it's an L8T 6.6 liter. Yeah, 6.6. That way you can put it in a Trans Am 6.6 TA, That would be cool, because then it's kind of a bigger version of the 6.2 liter stuff. So it would be interesting to see how that compares, because we have a 6.2 liter Chevy motors, and then we've got a 6.4 liter Hemi, and then a 6.6 liter Chevy. So it would be interesting to see how that how well that thing works, how well. It'd be interesting to see if the heads are any different and that kind of stuff. So it would be cool. But I just posted a video up today of doing some low buck, like back to basic kind of modifications, because as much as we all want to see 1 million horsepower stuff with turbos, intercoolers, and blowers, and nitrous, and all that stuff, most of the guys are not doing that. And I wouldn't have ever been able to do that had I not been in this business. And I can remember back in the day doing the stuff to my Mustang before I got hooked up with Kip at Turbo Magazine. And thank you for all that you did, Kip. It was awesome, from Turbo Magazine. Before I got hooked up with him, there was no hope of me having a supercharger or aluminum heads or any of the cool stuff. So I recognize the fact that most of us do, small stuff, catback exhaust or headers, or on a 5 liter Mustang specifically, we would have done, little things, underdrive pulleys and 65 millimeter throttle bodies, and we would have saved up for each one of those things and then bought them one at a time to find out how well they work. And it's the same thing with the Chevy guys. Like with the Chevy, with a Ford, I tested long tube headers, which obviously worked pretty well. We also tested my favorite camshaft and the normal GT40 intake manifold upgrade, because I haven't done that in a number of years. Those things are worth, guys want like real money for those things now, although the easy way to do is go get the Explorer upper and lower manifold, because it's basically like a Cobra deal, and it's a better combination. It's so much cheaper than trying to get the tubular GT40. And let's face it, the tubular GT40 worked. It made more power, but it's not as good as the other stuff that came later. I'm going to be putting up a video on the RPM2 and maybe a System X and things like that, because I tested a lot of that 5 liter stuff back in the day. And the Edelbrock stuff was actually not too long ago. When I say that, maybe a decade or less or so. So we got a lot of that stuff. And then on the small block, I compared, we ran long tube headers on it, and oddly enough, they didn't seem to make a great deal of power. And this is the first time I've seen, sometimes we see long tube headers not make a bunch on the top, depending on the combination, but they almost always make good low speed power, because they have long primary lengths, and that's the same as long runner lengths, and we get torque production from that stuff. And that normally works out, but it just didn't pick up very much. And this was just the bottom end was not stock, because we were going to put aluminum heads and roller cams and all kinds of stuff on it. So we did forged pistons in it, but we put 882 heads and a bone stock truck camshaft and a 2-barrel intake and a 2G quadrajet, or 2G 2-barrel throttle or come on, carburetor and the stock exhaust manifolds, and ran that bone stock, and it made a whopping 229 horsepower. And then we did the headers and did a 4-barrel, the stock cast iron quadrajet 4-barrel manifold and a quadrajet, and then did an aluminum intake, and then did a camshaft on it. But the camshaft that we put in was pretty small. It was definitely more of an RV-ish kind of camshaft, 206, 212 kind of thing. It was a pure energy, not even an extreme energy, but it did very well. It's an emissions legal cam for guys that are interested in that kind of stuff, and it picked up pretty good power. But we also did work to the cylinder heads when we did that cam swap, so it was a kind of a double upgrade. But that's good stuff. So, you know, for the guys that are doing low buck stuff, do it yourself. And actually, honestly, anymore, I don't think I would even waste my time with the 882 heads. I mean, maybe if you had the motor and that's what you had and you didn't want to go upgrade. Otherwise, you would, if you went to the wrecking yard, you wouldn't pick that motor. You would pick a Vortec motor just because it's better. It's better to start with. So that's stuff. That's all this cool stuff that's going on. We got some, you know, hopefully I'll have lots and lots of dyno stuff. I'm going to do some live feeds with Brian when I'm back there. So we'll do this kind of thing. We'll do a question and answer, except there'll be 2 of us, and one of us will actually know what he's talking about, because that will be Brian. So we'll do some live feeds with Brian. That will be good. You guys can make sure to bring all of your LS questions and cylinder head questions and stuff, and that will be good. And I'm also going to do some other videos with him on some testing that we do. And I'm going to do some interviews with him as well, some other videos, because it dawned on me, and I was talking to Matt about this last night on this 5-hour like marathon live feed that we did. The conversations that I have with people like Brian, because the things that we get into is different than what I normally talk about here. And it dawned on me that people would like to probably hear about that stuff, because we go down the rabbit hole sometimes, and it's pretty cool stuff. So we're going to get into some of that stuff, and it will be cool. So let's see. Have you been still have the Mustang from Silver State? I do. I still have that. That's an original owner. That's a 1988 5-liter LX, and I still have that car. See, Mike's all about the low buck stuff. David's here. Jason, Timmy, Mike, 6L6. Just ordered an XFI 236 cam. That's good for a 347. We like that cam. Let's see. He sells books on Amazon about LS stuff. I don't sell books on Amazon. I wrote a couple of books on it, and they are available through Amazon. I don't know if I have any more copies of that stuff or not, though. 2 minutes late. Way to go, Mike. HP tuners. I need tons of books. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to teach you about HP tuners. That's why it was good to talk to Matt last night about some of that stuff, because he has a lot more experience tuning the factory style stuff, like on chassis dynos, where you have to do a lot more work than I do. I mean, the stuff that I do on HP, on Holly HP or Dominator or Fast is really, really very easy. Cameron, that's one of the questions that came up last night. I've never tested any on-3 stuff, but Matt has tested a bunch of it, though. Do 350 blocks split in half like the 302? No, not. They don't have that same reputation. The BBK box intake wasn't bad. That's another one that's on my list. I did a TFSR versus the box R on a modified Ford. So I have that. And we also did 75 millimeter throttle body versus the 90 millimeter throttle body on it. And I may have tested on both of those. I know we tested on the box R upper. So that will be good stuff too. Callies or Dragon Slayer. I think both of those will work well. Would you trust decapped injectors? Not unless I tested them, not unless I flow tested them, which the guys at Westech have an ASNU injector machine, which we test the injectors before we run them on anything. Francisco, what's up? What would be your order of modifications for a 4-barrel intake, carb, cam, and exhaust, all about $400 with a limited budget? The thing that I would start out with would be the intake manifold, an intake manifold and a carburetor, because you're going to have to, it would be nice to do all of those, and you could go to the wrecking yard and get cheap stuff if you can, because when you're taking the intake manifold off, that's a good time to do the cam, because then you can take the lifters out and all of that stuff. But an intake swap is easy. So if you did an intake and a 4-barrel, you saw from the video that you're going to pick up like 30 horsepower if you're starting with a 2-barrel and then go to a 4-barrel. Oh, all for a Chevy 256 cylinder. I think intake would be first, and then exhaust. Actually, I might even do the cam before I would do the exhaust. Yeah, the aftermarket injectors seem to be more consistent than the decap stuff does. Usually, guys have to go through a number of decap injectors to group them to get ones that all flow the same. Variables aside, is there a correlation between cranking compression and octane, or even ignition timing? Why mine's 160 average, cranking with all 32, with 32 all in by 3,000 RPM. No, there's no cranking compression is going to be a function of your static compression and your cam timing, but the cranking compression is not going to determine, it's not going to be the only thing that determines octane or even your ignition timing. That's why when we run these tests, we just start with low timing and then add timing, and then the motor tells us whether or not it likes it. It's a lot easier, obviously, on the dyno than it is than if you don't have one. But having all of your timing in by 3,000 RPM, especially on a carbureted application, that's kind of the normal performance range, and we would do that on most carbureted applications too. But we would run it on 91 octane at the very minimum. I have done some stuff with VW air-cooled engines. The 4200, I'm just waiting for the adapter plate for the bell housing so that we can put it up on the dyno. What are my thoughts on I always wonder what people mean by that. Mike, tell me what you mean by that. When you say, what are my thoughts? You didn't even say, what are my thoughts? You just say thoughts on Ford 300 straight six. What do you mean? Like, do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I think that the intake is good? Do I think it needs camshaft? Do I think it runs and works? Should I get one from the wrecking yard? I would like if you're just maybe a little more specific. That's way too general for me to just go off and start talking about the inline six cylinder for like a half an hour, because I'm not going to do that. I like them and I do want to test them if that's what you're looking for. John's in the house. Julius is here. Julius, a lot of you guys got mentioned last night if you watched the sloppy show. I'm running a 388 small block Chevy, 220 runner, 600. That's a good cam combination. Miguel, the best power adder to put, or well, not power adder, but the best thing to upgrade on a 4.8 would be the camshaft. It has a big cam header, stock head, stock manifold, and throttle body. So if you already have a cam, you have headers, and you have stock heads, and you have a stock manifold, you should put boost on it. What power numbers do LS valve trains start to fall apart at? There's no correlation between power and valve train. Usually it's RPM and valve train. And then the valve train itself, like the design of the valve train, is not a problem, but you have to have the right cam profile, and it has to be stable at whatever RPM you want to run at it. Not just have the lift and duration and the other things that are going to make power there, but it has to be stable there. It has to be teamed with the right rest of the valve train, like the springs and retainers and stuff. Are bigger injectors worth it on a 4.8 manifold or bigger throttle body first? You only need injectors, don't add power. You only need injectors if you, I'm hoping, since you have a cam and stuff in there, Miguel, that you've tuned this. And so if you can't deliver enough fuel to your combination, then you have to put bigger injectors in and or a bigger fuel pump. ProCharge Mopar, he did go off on a rant on the diesels. That's for sure. He's definitely opinionated about that stuff. I don't get that worked up about things that I like versus things I don't like, but he obviously has a thing about diesel engines and apparently Harley Davidsons. I don't know about chassis dyno tune. The only place I ever do is West Tech, but also if you're down in Huntington Beach, Steve from Powertrain Dynamics is really, really good. You could put a supercharger on the 300. It will definitely take boost. Yeah, scuba, that's a good, that's what you want to find when you pull the pan or Gen 4 rods, right? Finishing up the reverse piston 318 tonight, installing the China oil pump now. Asking for NOS application is tuned already. Oh, so you want to put nitrous on it? You can do that. I wouldn't put a really big shot on there if you're going to inject it into the factory manifold, but it'll take 100 or 125 shot without any problem. We need some 3-valve love. I have done some 3-valve testing. And GT45s. Sure, they all want and GT45s. A 274 cam in a big block shouldn't be missing at 1500. Is it what intake manifold is on there and how is it tuned is what I would wonder for 1500 RPM. Is it 1500 RPM under load, or is it free revving? Is it, you know, is it high idle? Where are you getting the miss from? I have a Mercedes Brabus M113K supercharger, but I would like to test that motor. I think the stock motor is 600, but not sure what you think. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I just have to look that up online and see. It would be cool to run a Mercedes motor, especially a supercharged one. I thought that I found one at the wrecking yard, but somebody just put stickers on the side of the car, and it turned out to be an NA motor. What would your pick for aftermarket heads for an LS 6-liter or 408 stroker be? It depends on what you want to do. If you want to go cathedral or Recport, both of them are good. You can make power with either one of them. I have some good 408 stroker stuff up there. And if you look at the head test, or look at the good examples, look at the intake manifold test that I did, because I did that on a 6-liter. That should give you a fairly good idea. Those are all about 600 horsepower. There's a 408 test that I did up there with a couple of different camshafts. One of them made 175 horsepower. So that thing made 625 or 630 or something out of a 408, but lots and lots of torque. The airflow research heads are good. TrickFlow has good heads. There's lots and lots of good. There's no shortage of really good heads out there. An RPM air gap free revving and it's missing. So that's not a good sign. It's probably lean, I'm thinking. Precision Transmissions in the house. What's up? Yeah, scuba. I know Matt was kind of downplaying the GT45 turbo, and that's kind of like my go-to one. He doesn't like it, I think, because it's been overused and stuff, and he's not afraid to tell you. In my opinion, it's cheap, and it would be the go-to thing. I know that he tends to send everybody to VS Racing, and that's good. That GT45 is a lot less, I think, than the stuff that VS Racing has. I haven't looked over their total inventory, but that's a cheap turbo and it makes boost. So if you have a 4.8 or a 5.3, and you're only looking for 600 or 700 horsepower, that thing works pretty well, I think. Yeah, we do need more thumbs up. We're only at like 50% ratio here. That's not good. Rubber, don't give a ducky. Yeah, we normally run an MSD distributor on most of our stuff, but you can run the factory stuff as well. We normally run the billet distributors, and only because we have an ignition amplifier on the dynos that makes the hookup easy. You can also run a ready-to-run distributor, and all that works. And the reality is, if you put the plug gap down at a reasonable level, almost any kind of distributor is going to fire a naturally aspirated deal. RHS 230s. We've run some CNC ported RHS heads. I'm not sure what size they were though. I've got a friend who swapped a 463 valve into a Jeep. Is it running? Did they actually get it running with a 3-valve deal? And does it still have the variable cam, or was it one from a truck? See, you're getting precision. You're getting some love here. Need Metal says Precision Trans is a great channel. Just picked up a 302. Do not know if it's been done to the short block. It has TFS 170 heads, so a twisted wedge head. That's a good start, and sounds like a small cam, but cam has 500 CFM Edelbrock 4-barrel on it. Yeah, that carburetor will work good. I would tend more towards a 650 for most of the 302 stuff that's going to be in the 350 to 400 horsepower range, but a 500 is probably going to work, especially if you have it already. It's good when you have it. Grilling with red. I'm putting a VSR 80 millimeter on a 6.2, a Terminator X. I like to run 120 pound injectors, but I'm struggling to find low impedance ones. Yeah, that's going to be hard. How big are the? I think the Holley ones are also are low impedance. Can I tune Bosch 210s down low enough? I don't know. I don't know how good the idle quality is going to be with a 210. It would be better if you're running E85. That would help things because you have to flow more fuel. So your pulse width, your idle duty cycle might be up a little bit. Rubber, what's going on? So your duty cycle might be up a little bit, but do you need, how much power are you trying to make grilling? Can you get away with 80s? Because 80s will get you pretty far, especially on E85. It's going to be more like 800 or so, but you can get to 1,000 with, you know, lots of pump and stuff. Why do some people not recommend throttle by injection with a dual plane intake? I haven't found that it works as well as a carburetor does on a dual plane. I just haven't seen it be as consistent as the carburetor is. Precision trans. Man, everyone's talking about precision trans. You guys, you must be in the right spot. Travis, what's going on? Thank you very much. I have a 4.8. I want to put Texas Speed Titan as my intake, and I don't know if I should because I heard it won't help much. Is the Titan the really short runner one? Is that like the Holley low ram or the BTR intake? If that's the case, you do not want that. That is not a good choice, and it's a terrible choice for a 4.8 if that's the case, unless you're running to 10,000 RPM, which I'm sure you're not. Your truck manifold would kick the crap out of that thing if it's that short runner manifold. Okay, definitely E85 at the track. Yeah, you're going to need some injector then. Maybe the what are the Snake Eater performance injectors? They've got some 1000s and some 1500s. And what I don't remember what impedance they were though. Oh, cool. If he swapped in, it's running. That's a win. In your opinion, what are the best small block 350, 383 heads for under 2,000? So off-roaded use, and what are your thoughts on blueprint heads? I've run the blueprint heads and they work pretty well. I'm thinking that they're probably from somebody else, but I don't know. Maybe they cast their own stuff. I know that they do blocks and stuff, so maybe they do. The ones that I want to test now are the Skip White ones. And I'd like to compare those to the Enforcer heads from Airflow Research because they're both kind of low dollar ones. The Enforcer ones probably are a little bit more, but it'd be interesting to see. I'm thinking for under 2,000, that's quite a bit. So, I mean, I think that opens up to Airflow Research and TrickFlow and all that stuff, right? Like, how much power are you trying to make? What intake do you recommend for a 4.8? The truck manifold or the Trailblazer SS intake is the one that you want. A fast manifold is going to make the most power, but it's also expensive. And on a 4.8, you don't get as much from that manifold on a 4.8 as you do on a bigger 5.3 or 6.0. So Trailblazer SS is really good. Just to find info on running E85 with carbs. Yeah, there are E85 carbs and E85 blow-through carbs available. Grillin', I've run the Snake Eaters a lot. I've got a set of 1500s, and we've run them a bunch. That's the injector that I run when we go to E85 all the time on all the turbo stuff, and they've worked really well for me. I put them on our machine at Westech and flowed them, and they were all seemed to be fairly even. So but I do that. I didn't just check them because they came from them. We check every one of them. As a matter of fact, usually if I have a motor sitting for a long time, I'll take the injectors out and just put them up on the machine and flow them just to make sure that one of them didn't get stuck or gummed up, because there's nothing worse than getting everything ready and trying to start the motor and have it run on 7 cylinders. Then you got to drain the fuel and take everything apart and take the injector out. Sometimes you can just tap on the side of it and it will free up. And if you get lucky, that will work. But then you don't know if it freed up all the way. Did it only free up 80% of the way, or did it free up all the way? So it's nice to put them in the machine and then clean them if we have to, and then put them in. We know that they're good, and so we know that they'll inject fuel and do what they're supposed to do. I have not run Liberty heads either. Thoughts on the new Chevrolet Performance L8T blocks? Have you messed with one? No, I just sent Brian Tooley a message and said that it would be nice to get one on the dyno, because I think that would be a cool test. Princess Jamie, is it here for the live stream? Tom's going the anti-pump up. You're probably talking about the Rhodes lifters, right? Anti-pump up and bleed off lifters, are they worth trying out? I do. I want to try the Rhodes lifters. I want to try them on a conventional hydraulic flat tappet camshaft. I don't know. Do they have to make the Rhodes style lifter for a hydraulic roller too, right? That would be interesting. What are your thoughts on Edelbrock AVS2 carburetors? I've run those. I think I have a set of those for dual quad stuff too, and I've had good luck with them. The ones that I've put on have worked for what we've tried them on. They worked out of the box. They work pretty good. I didn't ever compare them to like a Holley XP or anything like that. We just ran them the way that they were. Max boost on a stock 302 Ford. There's no maximum boost number. People are worried about the block splitting on those, and we've had that happen at some fairly high torque numbers. So it depends on if you're talking about a completely stock 302, you don't want to run a ton of boost on that, because you should have a cam and springs and head studs and things in it. I'm running tons and 40s, and so I want to get the most out of 383. Well, if you think 2K is a reasonable budget, what about the best heads under 1500 then? See, Ron, I don't know what you mean by best. And that's one of the things I actually wanted to talk about with Matt last night, is the best definition is only subjective. It only comes from the person asking the question. I can't answer that. Only you can answer that, because, well, the question I get asked most often probably is, what is the best cam? And there's no way for me to determine that. Even if I told you, like, is it the cam that makes the most peak power? Is it the cam that makes the most peak torque? Is it one that has the highest idle vacuum, gets the best mileage? Invariably with a camshaft, it's going to be some compromise of all of those, because there's no one cam that does all of that. That magic cam is not a real thing. So ultimately, there's going to be a compromise. So now you guys, or whoever asked the question, has to determine what is the best acceptable compromise for that camshaft. What is it you want it to do? Because what you want it to do, like if somebody says, hey, what's the best camshaft? And I say, look, I would pick a stage 1 for a 5.3. And they say, no, I want the chop. Right off the bat, we have a difference of opinion of what the best cam is. So that's why I don't like answering that question, or the best heads or the best turbo, because there's not that. Just tell me what kind of power you want to make, and I'll tell you what combination will do that. That's kind of the easiest way. What size heads and brands do you recommend running with a 4.8? You should keep the stock 4.8 heads on there, or port the stock 4.8 heads. If you're going to put a head on there, you should put a 205 trick flow head on there. I'll watch David Vizard for opinion on those lifters. Yeah, David's old school, so he's probably run the Rhodes lifters from back in the day. Yeah, Carl, I want to test it, and what I would do is, the way that we would do it is, I would have to, it probably would be best to do it on a carbureted application. Those things seem to be most prevalent on, old school small blocks and stuff. But what I would want to do is get the thing to idle. So we'll get it to idle at whatever RPM it is, and then, log the idle vacuum. and then go, okay, we have this much camshaft, this much duration, this much lift, these valve events, this much overlap, and then go, okay, now let's swap in the Rhodes lifters and see if now we have, instead of 12 inches of vacuum, we have 14 inches of vacuum at the same idle RPM. That would be cool. Then we would know, hey, yeah, look, it does do that. Or no, it was 12 and now it's 12.2, and that's probably not even worth it. Whatever the number is, it would be cool to get it. And then to make sure, obviously, we would have to do power runs to make sure that if there was a change in idle vacuum, that there isn't a loss, or maybe there's potentially a gain from power as well, which would be cool. What do you think about VS 6762 twins on LQ9? Those are big enough. Yeah, that's good. You can make a lot of power with those, as long as your goal is not 2,000 horsepower. Robert, no, those 11R205 heads are not. Are they big enough? Yeah, for a 10-to-1 383, they're certainly big enough. I thought your question was, are they too big? They're not too big. They can make, you can make a lot of power with that head. The head will support 300 horsepower with ease. Yeah, you're still trying to finish the 5-hour marathon podcast yesterday. It was a lot of fun. How common is it to still have noticeable crosshatch on a high mileage LS? It is very common, and it's also common on 5-liter Ford engines. The Ford more so than the Chevys. They continue to have the crosshatch for a really long time, for a lot of miles. 400 horsepower as a daily driver, 351. Yeah, no, that's easy, no problem. I'm starting with a ProCharger 496 big block Chevy build. Will a 320 head support 1,100 horsepower? Yes, easily. You can make 1,100 horsepower with a 265 head. We could make 1,100 horsepower with a peanut port head without any problem. The best cam is a custom cam. And see, I completely disagree with that. People tend to think that shelf cam is one thing, is one level, and then custom cam is a better level, thinking that there's some sort of magic thing that's happening there. Almost every shelf cam started out as a custom cam. As a matter of fact, all of them did, because they had to make one of them and test it before they could make it a shelf cam. So in effect, it was a custom cam. And the people that think that you could take and make something like, I like the guys that think that, like when I did the test of, we ran about 11 or 12 different cams on an LS3. And we went from the stock LS3 cam all the way up to stuff that was 232 or 3 or 4 at 50, kind of getting near the limit of piston to valve clearance. And a lot of them had varying types of valve events and changes in exhaust duration and LSA and stuff. And we can't juggle the LSA too much. We can widen it, but we couldn't shorten it very much, because then we run out of piston to valve clearance too. But I like the guys that say, yeah, a custom cam would give you another 30 horsepower. And I'm like, there's not 30 horsepower there, not in any camshaft. Not, you could custom cam the living heck out of it, and it's not there. And the reason that it's not there is because you don't have enough piston to valve clearance to play with. We already went through the whole gamut of all the things that are there, and it's just not there. But people think that that magic stuff is. Are there limits to the factory oil system on a big block? Tom, the biggest problem we have with a big block is not oil supply. Usually it's windage normally. And that's especially the case on stroker motors. We normally drop the oil level on the dyno, because we're not going around turns and stuff to get rid of it. And we'll see a dramatic change both in power and the oil pressure curve when we get rid of that windage, because then the pump picks up aerated oil and stuff. Do you have a video that discusses single plane and dual plane versus carbureted and EFI? The single plane and dual plane, I want to get back to that. Yes, Moondoggy, the single plane and dual plane work exactly the same, whether you have EFI on it or a carburetor. Now, you can dial in the air fuel differently with the EFI, but the intake manifold still functions the same. In fact, it still functions the same even if you add boost to either one of those. And I have videos up for that. 450 horsepower NA383 recipe, you're in luck. There are videos up on 383 power recipes, so that's already up there. But 450 horsepower is really easy. Any kind of 224, 230, or 230, 236 camshaft, almost any kind of decent small block Chevy aluminum cylinder head, like a trick flow Super 23 head, an airflow enforcer, probably the Skip White stuff. I haven't tested it. The Pro Max stuff, certainly Edelbrock stuff. Any of those, a dual plane RPM air gap, a 650 or probably a 750 on a 383, even at 450 horsepower, long tube headers, and you're there. What's the best bang for your buck and practical mod or mods to add a bit more power to a 429 engine? It's the same thing as everything. That 429 probably already has good enough head flow. So I would go with a camshaft, but I would go with a small camshaft for a 4x4 truck. So do a RV style cam, a 206, 212, or a 210, 218, 212, 220. That kind of thing. It's going to be fairly low lift. You want a dual plane intake like an RPM air gap for that 429. That works really good. And long tube headers. The only thing that saves me at stoplights is a 3000 stall converter. That crutches a lot of issues if you have a lot of stall converter in it. What trans did you use with your Fox Mustang? I got a blown T5 and weighing options. I ran a T5 its whole life, even with the supercharger for 85,000 miles, running the Silver State 12 times, running the Foxtrot event for Super Ford, running it out at El Mirage, running it out at Fort Stockton, driving it every day as my only means of transportation, going 193 miles an hour. As a matter of fact, we took the trans out of that car and put it in our the car that we ran at the Long Beach Grand Prix. So that T5 lasted a long time, but I'm pretty good at, because I'm a road race shift guy and not a drag race shift guy, which drag race shifting tends to break those things. The must-have upgrade to any ZZ502 for the street. It's probably more cam, I would think. Why do you think draw-through turbocharging is so uncommon? Because most of the turbos don't have the proper seals for that. And also drawing through makes the carburetor that you're drawing through a limiting factor unless you use a really big one, and then you're dealing with a really big one. And that becomes more problematic when you're blowing through it. The carburetor size, unless you go way up in power, has very little effect. So you can make, like we've made 13 or 1400 horsepower with an 850, which you can't do on a draw through application. The other thing I think, and a lot of people don't mention it, I think that drawing fuel into an impeller that's spinning 60, 70, 80, 90,000 RPM, I think can eventually shorten the life of the impeller. What did I eat for dinner? If I wanted 550 NA horsepower at the tire through a T56 while staying NA, what LS combo would you pick? An aluminum block. That's going to have to be big. You're not going to do that with a 6-liter unless you want to run it really high RPM, and it's going to be an expensive build if you do that. You can do it with if you're going to do it with an aluminum block, you could do it with an LS2 or 3 aluminum block and make it a 416, and then put after you do that, you've solved all the problems. You can make that kind of power very easily, and you're gonna have lots and lots of torque. So you're gonna have good drivability. You'll come off corners. It will do all that stuff. That's easy. Any sort of ported head and airflow research, trick flow, PRC, Dart, almost anybody's head will work, and a cathedral port head will work. A rec port head will work. For what you're doing, I'd stay with a long runner intake like a fast. And if you're gonna do a fast, I would do a cathedral port head. If you're going to do an LS3 base, a ported rec port head, then I would just go with a stock LS3 manifold. What kind of electric fans did you recommend? I don't know. I'm not a fan guy. I'm a big fan, but I don't know. Most of the stuff we do is on the engine dyno, so I don't really get into fans like on the driving on the road. I believe the cam in the GMPP is 194/204 cam in it. So you're talking about the heads, 194/204? Okay, I see they're putting decimal points in there, which is where there shouldn't be. A 194/204 cam is really, really small. Doing an Explorer upper and lower GT40 head swap and an 89, nice. HO daily driver. The mild cam, Extreme Energy 274 cam is always the cam that I recommend. That's the one that I use. If you want to go down from that, you can do a 264 or a 262. Both of those will drive around really nice. World product heads or trick flow heads. What do you think of the air gap intake? Air gap intake is great. I would pick trick flow over the world product heads. And a good cam for 450 horsepower. Ron, and I want to look back and see what your combination was. Was yours the 383? Oh, your 350. Ron, so you're talking about the 351 then? Kevin, what's up? And on the 383, a good cam. Like, take a look at the Edelbrock upgrade that I did on the Junkyard 351. That was 460 something at the flat. So that should give you a real good idea. That was like a 234 kind of cam. So take a look at the video that's up, and you'll get a really good idea. Yeah, Tim, I told him he had to, if he was going to try to make 550 at the wheels, that he was going to have a lot of RPM. Recommendations for a small block Ford to make 400 horsepower. You need the right heads. Like, if you look, I have videos up of the comparison I did between a 5-liter Ford and the 305 5-liter Chevy, and we made over 400 with a 274 cam. It had a set of TFS 11R heads on it. It had a dual plane RPM air gap intake and probably a 650 or 750 carburetor long tube headers, and that will get you there. And if you want to do it with EFI, you're going to need to pick a manifold, not the GT40 or the Explorer stuff. You're going to have to pick something else like the RPM2 or a System X. Kevin, I think we answered the draw through temperature stuff. The draw through temperature will aid in charge cooling, but the blow through also does that already. So having a carburetor mounted on an intake manifold cools the charge temperature a lot, and blowing through it does that as well. And actually, you get a greater drop in temperature because the temperature going in is hot from the boost. And then because we have excess cooling basically on an NA motor with a carburetor, if you measure the temperature underneath the carburetor, it gets pretty low. Yeah, don't try to run a roots blower without fuel or without some sort of lubrication. Just ask Gail Banks about that. Saul, what's up? Oh, Saul, okay, I follow your channel from Mexico, and you make the greatest illustrated videos. Thank you very much. I'm building a 347 stroke with a carburetor twin screw. A carbureted twin screw supercharger and some nitrous. It's pretty adventurous. The Mexican block will have no problem holding 650 horsepower, and forge internals would be a good idea. Rather than the blower, I would recommend you just do a blow through turbo on it. You'll probably make more power. Late to the party, when do you think you get a chance to run the twin GT3076s? The guys from Max Speeding sent me those, so they my bets are good for 800 wheel horsepower. So you think that the 3076s can make 900 flywheel horsepower? That'll be interesting to see if they can get that close. Hey, Sus, if I want to make 700 horsepower, if you want to make 700 horsepower with a turbo 4.8, you don't need to do anything to the heads. The stock heads will make 1,000 horsepower. So with a boost on them. So you don't have to worry about that. If you take a 4.8 and put any kind of stage 1 or stage 2 cam in it, springs and the right injectors and pump and E85 and a turbo with an intercooler, and turn the boost up, it will make 1,000 horsepower if you put 1,000 horsepower turbo on it. So you don't have to worry about upgrading the heads. Are the generic aluminum heads of the big crate motor builders are using any good? I would think that they would be. I don't know that I don't know specifically which ones you're talking about. I'd have to look and see which ones Summit is using. I don't know who makes their heads. Do you have to balance rods and pistons and camshaft if you're just cleaning? Well, you never balance the camshaft, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you just take the rods and pistons out and clean them and put them back in, you don't have to rebalance anything. In fact, a lot of guys, and I was talking to Matt about that last night because I told him I'm going to do a video on finding out the differences in weight between the the Gen 3 rod and the Gen 4 rod and the Gen 3 piston and the Gen 4 piston and the 4.8 rod and the 5.3 rod and the different cranks, the Gen 4 crank and the Gen 3 crank and the 4.8 crank, so that we can get an idea when people are mixing and matching this stuff, whether it's even necessary. And I know Matt told me, he said, I just put them in and run them. And I was telling him a story last night. You guys probably may not have even heard this, but when I ran my 302, I ended up in my Mustang, and my supercharged Mustang, I ended up hurting one of the pistons. I had Wiseco forged pistons in it. There were 8 and 1, because, you know, when you run boost, you have to lower the compression. I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I know now. But I hurt one of the pistons, and I didn't have enough money to buy another Wiseco forged piston. But I knew Kip from Turbo had Wiseco forged pistons. So I said, Kip, can I have one of your spare pistons? He said, yeah, no problem. Come by, dude. Just come by. And he gave me the piston, and I gave it to Rick over at Pacific Performance and said, okay, can you put this in? I've got to go to work, and yada, yada, yada. And he was great, and he did, and he's awesome. And thanks, Rick, for ever doing that. And the part of the story that's interesting is all of my Wiseco pistons were 30 over, and his was 40 over. So Rick proceeded, and not to mention the fact that it was a different piston. It wasn't the same piston. It wasn't the same dish design, and it was 40 over. And so he ball honed it. He ball honed another 10 thousandths out of that cylinder, because the motor was still together. The crank was still in it and all that stuff. So he ball honed, you know, for hours and hours and hours, and finally got the piston to fit in there, and put that piston on that rod, and we ran it like that. So I had one 40 over piston and 7 30 over pistons, and then I had one that was weird and wonky because it was a different piston. And so, but we ran it anyway. So we know that it was out of balance, but it didn't feel that bad. What compression ratio at max on a build for a 5.3 for stroke 5.3 87? Yeah, Chevy Life. I don't know what you're asking there. I don't know 87 to 93. Those are going to be dramatically different. That's 6 octane points different. So is it and you say it's what compression ratio at max on the, and I don't know what built 5.3 means. You got to tell me what you're doing. What is it you're trying to do with the motor, and what's done to the motor? Is it going to be supercharged or turbocharged? Is it NA? What are you doing with it after the motor goes together? Is it 5.3? Is it stroked? I need more information. I have a set of, where are we going here? Saul, where am I at? I have a set of P heads and a set of 69 351 heads, both rebuilt with springs, 492 5-liter. Robert, I wish I could answer that. I don't remember. 69 351 heads were the go-to head before any of the stuff came out. I honestly don't know how they compare to a P head. My gut would tell me that the 351 head has a bigger port in it, but I don't remember ever flowing any of those. So if anybody knows, if anybody's ever flowed a 69 351 head, which are getting harder and harder to find now, and let me know how that compares to a P head. I would pick the 351 head only because I like the bolt pattern better, and you have better access to plugs and not burning wires in the P heads. So if they were the same, I would pick it because of that. But I don't know about the flow rates. Richard, how can I send you a video of the draw through? Granville, I mean, I would like to look at it. I can send you, I can put my email down if you want to send me a link to it. But 6@aol.com. I'm not doubting that guys make power from draw through stuff. Gail Banks used to run millions of horsepower with those things back in the day. It's just not as common anymore. Have you ever tested the Blueprint Engine's 195 heads? I think we have. I think that those are as-cast heads, but the thing is I never compared them to anything else. So we just ran them on whatever motor they came with. On a roller truck 351, what is the limiting factor for RPM besides the head and springs? Well, it's always valve train, Jeff. So if you want, and also on that motor, you're not going to make any power with a stock truck manifold, and you're not going to make any power with a stock truck head, because they don't flow enough to make any power, and they're going to want to make peak power at like 5,000 RPM. So you'd need lots of camshaft, you'd need lots of intake, and you need lots more cylinder head, and then you'd also need the right cam and then the right springs and rest of the valve train to do that. I know, John. What's up with that? Oh, see now. Okay, now we're getting 100 and 149. What happened to 160 watching? Did we go down? Where's everybody going? Charles, with that head, I would think that you could get away with 10 to 1. I like those 265 heads. They work really well. Streetcar builds got some Pro Max heads on a stock short block 302 and some nitrous. That's a good combination. 11.4 and a full weight Fox. That's good. I just put Comp Cams Extreme RPM. Okay, 269, 216, 220. In my LK9, have you ever tested anything like that? Well, 6 liter or 6 pounds of boost, that'll work fine. The 216, 220 cam is not far off from lots of other cams that guys have run. I've run the 220, 224, I think, that TrickFlow had back in the day, and we ran it with a positive displacement supercharger. And I think we've run that cam with somebody's really low dollar turbo kit too, at about 8 or 9 pounds. And the boost just adds to whatever the cam did. It's how much power you make NA, and then the boost just adds to that. That cam will work fine. Let's see. How do you feel about the aluminum block LS3 for boost compared to iron block? I don't think it would be even close to handling nearly as much as the LY6. Jeff Smith has a pumpkin. Holy punctuation. Thoughts on Canfield 220 heads, 540 horsepower, 355 with a 142 blower. I would like to have an intercooler on that combination. On that 142 blower, the problem is that, especially at 540 horsepower, you're spinning that blower pretty fast. Matthew, I don't do diesel stuff. Tom, no flat plane crank stuff. You have a 364 80 over bore, flat tops 274, 10 to 1 with 305 closed chamber heads. I think that's your limiting factor, Devin. Those things don't flow very well unless you ported the heck out of them. Also, the chamber diameter is pretty small for a 205 head for that 305. For that 305 head. Fire Marshal Bill. On your NA306 4x4, look at a 258 extreme energy cam. That would be good for that. Yeah, I used to see part store reman engines with different size pistons in them. That does happen. Sinister Silverado, can I run ZZ4 springs on 882 heads with pressed in studs? I don't think it'd pull a stud out. I think that you'd be okay. I don't know how much RPM you're trying to run. Then you might run into problems, but I don't think that spring is going to be too much for a press in stud. Kevin wants me to test a VR6. Josh, 706 versus 318. Take a look at the video, Josh. That's up. I tested the 706 versus the 318, both NA and turbocharged. And I've tested those on 5.3s and 6.0s. The 706 makes more power every time. VW air-cooled drag bugs mostly draw through turbos. Yeah, back in the day, they were running lots of draw-through stuff. And I saw some that were blowing through Delortos. Richard, have you reused stock head bolts? Yes, lots. I don't reuse them like Matt does, but I've reused them a bunch. What about 302 a GT40 heads intake and a E303 cam? That works good. That combination's been run millions of times, I'm sure. That camshaft is pretty big for a 5.3. It won't be too Chevy for life. That 469 cam is pretty big for a 5.3. You can run it. We've done it before. It's going to make power at the top of the RPM range. An LSXR intake would be a good match for that. 215 head's fine. I probably would go with the 205 head on the 5.3, and that will make good power. You can make with that combination, especially if you put a forged rotating assembly in it, you can actually put more camshaft in it than that. But that combination will make over 500 flywheel horsepower NA, even with a 5.3. With a 383, it will be going towards 600. Everybody that's recommending the VR6, how much power does that thing make stock? I actually would like to test somebody's recommending, Warfighter's recommending testing the sound cams like the Thumpers and stuff, and the Howard's Rattler and the Chopper cams. I would like to test at least a Thumper cam or something like that, because I just want to see kind of what I wanted to do is run that with boost and show people that, hey, look, when we run a stock cam or we run a turbo cam or when we run a cam like that, that probably has lots of overlap, because it has a really tight LSA and has a lot of exhaust duration. Can we still run boost on it? Because that's not a turbo cam, but it probably is. That combination, like I said, will make that power, and then you just Chevy for life. If you just add nitrous to it, it will just add to whatever's there. The supercharger on the 2-valve Mark was probably a 112. I think that kit was a 112. I think I said it was an M90, but that test was probably done 15 years ago. But I think it was a 112. Yeah, Thash's pendant, that's a good point, is that if you're doing a draw through, it's you almost can't run an intercooler. I mean, I would never do that. I would never do a draw through turbo and then into an air-to-air intercooler. You're going to get all kinds of fuel puddling on the front side of that cooler. So then if you're going to intercool it, you have to intercool it after you introduce fuel. But if it's a draw through, you can't really do that. Plates are arriving early. That's good. I will be gone at Brian Tooley Racing for a little while, so we'll have to do that when I get back. What would you recommend for compression on 87 octane and also 93 octane? Also, would you recommend build the stroker 5.3? I don't know how a 383 stroker will be plenty reliable for the street. I don't know what you're going to be doing with it, but the motor itself would be reliable as long as the tune is right. If you're doing a 5.3 and for compression for 87 octane would be low, it would be stock. It would be stock or even lower than stock, so 9-to-1 or less if you're running 87 octane. If you're running 93, you can run 10-to-1 or more. And but again, you can't have all of that. I've never used Elgin stainless rockers. If you want to make power Chevy for life, you should just put boost on it. You should have a 5.3 with a small cam and springs, and then just add a small turbo to it, and you'll make 700 or 800 instead of 500 or 600. I'm about to use gapped and ARP rod bolt at 62 LS with the cam and 400 shot. The 400 shot is what would bother me about that, George. Let me know how that goes. And you don't have to worry about rod bolts in those things, because the rod's going to break before the bolt will break. Intake manifold recommendations for a stock 5.9 Magnum with long tube headers and a throttle body, 350 peak. Is it carbureted? Oh, you're doing throttle body injection? I don't know. Are there even any manifolds available for that? I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that, Kevin. I don't know. about the other EFI manifolds that are available for that. My recommendation was going to be run a dual plane carbureted manifold on that, because that's what's going to work best. Do you have a intake manifold recommendations? Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you can do besides the stock manifold. I'd recommend a cam though. So Jay, you got beat on the highway in your 94 GT by your wife's Camry. Man, you do need to do some upgrades. Dan, all of those cams work fine. The 270 works good. The 264 works good. The 274 works good. They all work good. Yes, I do want to do a Jeep 4-liter in the future. Max, oh, so the VR6 makes 175 horsepower stock. And so how, I mean, honestly, I like it. I think it's cool. But how much power do you think that you can make with a stock bottom end 175 horsepower motor? If you're going to build a Stroker 351, I would recommend a 408. You can't do a 427 with a stock block. Well, I don't say can't. You shouldn't try to do a 427. You should do a 408. You should do a 4-inch bore and or a 4030 bore and a 4-inch stroke. Oh, another question. What kind of injectors should I run? Well, the injectors are going to be determined kind of by what fits in the intake manifold. And was this a boosted one, Jesus? I can't remember now. If you're going to run E85, you need to have the E85 plus whatever the power level is. Deer Valley, we've run Beehive Springs. You have to get the right retainer and the right keeper for it. To the Watcher, if you got a 302, there's lots of good heads. There's lots of inexpensive aluminum heads. I haven't tested all of them, so I can't recommend them. The Promax head stuff seemed to work pretty good. Somebody's saying Skip White stuff works. I've never tested it. The Enforcer head we know is good because our AFR does a good job on that stuff. The Trick Flow, the go-to Trick Flow twisted wedge head is a really good one, and you can certainly make 400 horsepower with that. And then that 274 cam or something like that. There are lots of good cams out there too. Chris, I'm talking about the older 5-liter 302, the original, the OG one from started long ago, but the Fox chassis stuff. You can put a Paxton supercharger on a stock 351 block. But you should do stuff to that motor because that motor makes 250 horsepower stock. And so if you put boost on it, it's not going to make very much power. If you just put a cam in it, it's going to help it a lot. Princess Jamie, I'm curious about the L8T also, the 6.6 liter. I'm trying to talk Brian Tooley into running one of those. I think you need to check that Camry. She might have a 50 shot on it. Ben, yeah, it should easily do that. It should easily make 325 with that 258 cam. And it'll drive nice and be torquey and stuff. Aaron says we go 8s on stock turbo 12 valve. Are you talking about 8s in the eighth or 8s in the quarter? And if you're going 8s in the quarter, that's not stock. Miguel, going on what you said about a 5.3 with a small cam, are you still trying to do the turbo, Miguel? Is that what you're trying to do? Put any stage 1 cam, any stage 1 turbo cam, any stage 1 NA cam, just any kind of torque cam from Brian Tooley Racing, a stage 1 truck cam, a stage 1 NA cam. Any of those things will work, and then add boost to it, and it will make the power that you want. So is Northern Performance Group, is Aaron sandbagging? Is that what we're saying? No way, Jose. And actually, that's not the OG 302, because there were 302s long before the Fox body, but the Fox body was the one that I give credit to basically reinvigorating the whole Ford performance stuff, because it started, revolutionized the industry. We had there were no performance options really for Ford stuff before that. And after that was introduced, it changed the whole like performance landscape. Saul, I wouldn't recommend a single pattern cam for that 347. I would recommend something newer like the Extreme Energy stuff, or the XFI cam for that 347. Yeah, Aaron, if that's directed at me, I don't know VW guys. I don't follow that. So I don't know about the VR6 stuff. That's why I was asked. I don't even know how much power they make stock. So obviously I'm not following that stuff. UPS Mech, did you get to see that? And Aaron, it's no disrespect to you. I just don't. There's lots of things I don't know. I don't know who has the fastest National Metropolitan either, and I should, because I really like those. And I do like the VR6. I've actually built supercharger kits for VWs for the 2-liter NA motor, and we built a little. I think that was a Vortec that we did. I'm thinking it might have been a Powerdyne, but I think it was a Vortec. And we tried to get it to the guys who was doing all of the VW stuff back then. We tried to sell it to one of the companies so that they could distribute it, and they ended up not using it, but it worked pretty well. And I have done lots of 1.8 turbo stuff on the chassis dyno, but never on the engine dyno. Have you seen the Summit cams? No, they asked me to do testing on the new Alphabet cams, but we haven't done anything yet. Duramax Hackett, you can take a look at what we did with the stock bottom end stuff. With an LQ4, that's going to be probably a Gen 3 unless you have a later one. You can get away with that sort of power output and you don't even need to do heads. You can just do cam, and you don't even need to do an intake. You can do the stock truck intake, the stock 317 heads, put springs, put cam in it, and 800 horsepower is just putting a turbo and an intercooler and E85 in it, and you're fine. I don't know if the Z303 will fit. I think the blueprint heads would be better than the 69 351 heads, Alexandra. If you had a fast small block Ford before 1983, you knew what you were doing. That's the thing, the guys that, all of the Shelby guys, obviously they knew. Yeah, the 2-liter was, you're right, Tim, the 2-liter was way underpowered on that. It was just the base motor. And that's why we did the blower kit for it, because they sold more of those than they sold of all of the other ones. So we thought, well, that one needs more power, right? So that's the one we kind of concentrated on. The Nova will be coming back. You didn't miss anything yet. The Lenati bootlegger cam did good. I think I have the dyno results up for that. Scott, you need a 94 and up for the hydraulic roller 5.8. Thanks, James. Did you get to watch that stuff with Matt? I'm sorry it went so long. 5 hours is a long time to be talking. And I had to listen to myself. It was good to hear stuff from Matt, though. But everybody warned me that it was definitely going to go long. Okay, guys, time to get going. Thank you all for showing up, and I will be back. We're going to be doing some stuff with Brian Tooley, so we'll be doing some live stuff with him, have some videos coming up of the testing that we're doing there. So get your questions ready for Brian, because he's a really sharp guy. He'll be able to answer a lot of stuff. He can get, we'll probably go into real depth when we're having our conversations, because we tend to do that, and hopefully it won't be too technical. There's a lot of sharp guys on there, so I'm sure everybody will get it. But we do go off on tangents and just start talking about stuff. But it's kind of cool because Brian's a really good guy. He's really knowledgeable, and we get to talk about a lot of cool stuff. Hopefully we'll get to do a lot of cool testing. We're definitely going to do some L83 stuff. I'm hoping we're also going to do L86 and LT1 stuff. And obviously we're going to do some LS stuff as well. And yeah, I got my fingers crossed. I had to send him a message about that 6.6 liter. So who knows what we're doing. It'll be really cool stuff. I will see you guys later.